Shetty. Welcome to the Nifty Travel Podcast.
It's a joy, honor, and a pleasure to be on your show today, Alex. Looking forward to a chat all about travel.
Yeah, me too. And what I'd like to ask my guests straight off is what's your earliest memories of travel?
Just a little backstory for yourself and for your guests. So, I'm born and raised here in Vancouver, Canada, and my parents are immigrants from India. So, I'm a second generation Indo Canadian. There's a little joke. We're called coconuts because we're brown outside and we're white inside. In terms of my earliest travel experience, was actually to India because my mom and dad's both their parents were still there and their siblings were there. So my parents would take me on almost annual trips to India. So I've been there around 10 times, especially in my elementary and high school days. And then when I became an adult, I also went there by myself to do a backpacking journey to discover my ethnic heritage. But I would say probably those trips to India and also some road trips here in, they call it beautiful British Columbia. So I'm in Vancouver, which is the city, and then British Columbia is the province, and then the country is Canada. So yeah, some road trips around this Pacific Northwest area of North America.
Yeah, so it sounds very much like it gave you the travel bug. It's something you had from a very early age.
I don't know about that, Alex. Even though I was doing these like family trips, I didn't know if that was necessarily travel because we were basically just traveling from one relative to the other. It wasn't like going to Taj Mahal or going to, the rivers of Kerala or Rajasthan. It was more just like family trips. My real travel bug was in like my 20s when I had like finished university and I went backpacking across your neck of the woods. I was in London, England, doing a working holiday visa, and then I was also in like mainland Europe, doing a Eurail pass, like making a circle around Europe. So that's really when I caught that infectious travel bug in my 20s.
Hmm. Wow. Yeah. Well, it's a good time to be going when uh, you're younger, isn't it? Because it's kind of a very formative time in our lives, isn't it? Did it have a
Yes,
similar
I
time?
agree with you. Yeah.
So Canada's obviously your home, and yeah, I mean it's a big country. Do you feel like that you're in a big country?
Yeah, definitely. We are the second biggest country by landmass after This is a little trivia. So Russia is the biggest. Then we have Canada, where I'm living, and then we have China, and then Brazil and Australia and a few others. But yeah, basically Russia, Canada, China, the three biggest. And population not so big. We have about just like close to 40 million right now, and it's very small considering how much land mass we have. And of course, in the north, it's like almost inhabitable because it's like so cold and minus temperatures. So it's very difficult to live there, obviously. But in terms of like, yeah, Canada, I do feel it's quite big. And I've been to 7 out of the 10 provinces. So I'll just name them out. I've been to BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec. And I haven't been to like the eastern provinces, so like Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, Prince Edward Island. And plus in the north, there's three territories called Yukon, Northwest Territories, and Nunavut. So I have not been in that area. Yet I've been to like 81 countries outside of Canada, including Canada 81. So I feel I've done a lot more of the world and outside of Canada. In my own country, I mean, I'm still grateful that I've seen those provinces I have, but in terms of the amount of space, I have hardly touched a little incy wincy part of Canada. And there's so much beauty here to see and so many things to do if you're a nature lover. And yeah, I'm a big ambassador of travel here to Canada for myself and for visitors. And yeah, it's a wonderful country to be living in and to explore as well.
I think you're right about feeling that you haven't touched everywhere. I mean, I get that feeling even living in the UK.
Mm.
I thought I'd walked on every patch. I'd lived in one place for 50 years, and then the final week before I moved somewhere else, someone's showed me a new place I'd never been to. So I don't think size is a limitation in that regard.
Yeah, you're making a good point. Like UK is probably like it'll fit within British Columbia, the province I'm in, because I've been to UK and it's like quite small, in terms of the geography and the land area. But even there's so much, little cities and nooks and crannies and places that, yeah, it will take several lifetimes to explore it in depth.
Yeah. I've spoken to a few Americans and I've asked them about differences between US states. And they all seem to say that every US state is like a country in its own right. Um, are there similarities in Canada?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question, and I've heard that same kind of philosophy from Americans. So when you meet American, they'll say, "I'm from Connecticut, I'm from Texas, I'm from Florida, I'm from California." Usually, when you meet a Canadian, they'll just say they're from Canada or they're from Vancouver, because I think most people don't know what provinces or states are. Like some people don't even know Alberta, what's that, or Saskatchewan or Manitoba. They don't know what that is. So that's probably the reason why we don't share. Whereas most people know Vancouver, most people know Toronto, most people probably know Montreal. So those are like the three biggest cities. And in terms of like what your question is about the differences between provinces, yes, definitely. So like politically, there's some differences. Like I'll just give you a quick example. So I'm in British Columbia, which is a very liberal province. Whereas if you go to Alberta, which is the next province, they're touching each other. It's a very conservative province. It's kind of like the Texas of Canada, very conservative politically. There's cowboys and rednecks, and just like the value system is very traditional. So that's just touching provinces. When you go to the Far East, they're called Newfoundlanders or Newfies. It's kind of a nickname for the Newfoundland people. And they have their own culture and own language and own accents as well. And then you almost have a different country on its own, which is Quebec, which has fought for sovereignty and autonomy several times over Canadian history, our short but beautiful history. As people might know, Canada was French, then British, and now it's still under the Commonwealth. So we do have the King. Right now, all of our money still has Queen Elizabeth, but I'm sure it's going to switch over to King Charles. So Quebec is definitely has its own story and history connected very closely to France. And when you go there, I actually went to Quebec in September, so 2 months ago, and that was actually my first visit ever to Quebec. And even though I'm born and raised here, I'd never been to Quebec. I'd always heard about it. However, when I went there, I really understood how French it is. Like literally, when you go to, for example, Ottawa is like bilingual and it's the nation's capital. And when you cross the river, it'll go from like all English signs to all French signs. And then the people will be speaking French and they'll have these fleur-de-lis, which is like the symbol of Quebec everywhere. So that's probably the most profound difference of a province within the country, Quebec and the rest of Canada, like the English and then the Francophone.
It's interesting what you say about language because I have a good Argentinian friend who obviously speaks South American Spanish. And we were on a sports holiday to Spain, but not just the main part of Spain, northern uh, Spain, which is known as Catalonia. And they have their own version of Spanish. And what was really interesting was that he was totally lost in Catalonia because it wasn't, uh, it wasn't European Spanish. It was almost their own version. Um, no, it's quite fascinating. And I think there's a similar distinction in the French language, isn't there? I think North American French has evolved in a similar way to Spanish has.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Like, there's French-speaking countries around the world, of course, France being the major one, Quebec being the province, then African French countries, and then even in South America, you have French Guyana, which is French-speaking, and then you have some Asian countries that have some French influence, right? So, yeah, and obviously they all adapt and evolve over time and over I guess integration into the local language, local culture and customs. So it's quite, fascinating how that all happens. Even English, right? Like we're both English speaking, but what sometimes you'll use the word lift for elevator, and just and then we'll drive on different sides of the roads, and we'll have different pronunciations. But you and me can understand each other for the most part. But whereas, like, if I hear a Scottish or Irish person, I can't even tell sometimes if they're speaking English because of some of the kind of the accent and the speed of how they speak, and I have to kind of like say, "What? Excuse me, pardon me." So I'm not sure if you have that issue with your fellow, United Kingdomers in Scotland or Ireland or in Wales.
We certainly do, and certain cities have stronger colloquial expressions than others. So yeah, it's not just for North America's benefit. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Now, yesterday, very conveniently, I heard a new travel expression that I'd not come across, and it's called coolcation. And I don't know if you've come across the word. It's essentially there are people seeking cooler climates because some countries now are getting particularly hot, either all the time or at certain times of the year. And I thought, oh, I'm speaking to Ricky later. It must get cold in Canada from time to time. So would you say there are places people could go to get cool?
I have never heard that expression, coolcation, and I happen to be wearing a hoodie for the people who are watching on YouTube. For the audio people, you just have to imagine. And I'm warming up here with my coffee and like a hoodie, and it is getting colder. And you just have to remember where I'm living. Vancouver is actually the mildest part of the whole country. Like if you go to like Toronto, Montreal, or further east, they call Winterpeg instead of Winnipeg Winterpeg, because these provinces and some of these cities, they go like -20, -30, like just crazy unimaginable cold weather and lots of snow. Whereas here in Vancouver, there's a kind of nickname for Vancouver. It's called Raincouver, because here we actually get a lot of rain, similar to over there in the United Kingdom. Lots of rain, a lot of gray skies, kind of gloominess. So if people want the cold, yeah, come on by. You're in the right country for the cold. We're known to be a cold country. I would say myself, I'm more of a, I don't know the term coolcation. I don't know if there's hotcation. I would probably be the hotcation kind of person. And a lot of other Canadians do the snowbird kind of trips from Canada to Mexico, Costa Rica, Central America, South America, Hawaii, of course. Just like these are within a few hours flight from Vancouver to get away from these winters. Some people might do like a vacation property over there, or a timeshare, or Airbnb. So I do have a lot of friends who do leave for the winters, and then they come back. We have like 6 months of winter, roughly November, December, January, February, March, and then April starts becoming spring, and then summer, then fall, the 4 seasons. But the winters are pretty brutal, and I'm grateful to be living in Vancouver because I'm not a particularly cold weather person. It might be because of my Indian genes, but I'm definitely what they call a sun worshiper, a sun chaser. I love the vitamin D, and I love the blue skies. And I struggle, honestly. I struggle here with the Vancouver winters with like seasonal affective disorder and just feeling a little bit more down and out around the winters, and having to do stuff that's outdoor is difficult because you got to always plan like how many layers of clothes do I need to have? Do I need a beanie or like a hoodie? Do I need to have gloves? Do I need an umbrella? Do I need a snow shovel when it starts to snow? And so there's obviously a lot more planning when it's winter, whereas summer, t-shirt and shorts, that's my definitely preference. Hotcation.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think we're reasonably similar. We migrate south, and everybody else migrates north.
Exactly.
So, taking a different track, clearly you're a family man, and you have, have experience of traveling with children. So, um, yeah. So, firstly, what's that like? What uh, Yeah, tell us what that's like, and why did that inspire you to think about writing books uh, about children or how to entertain them, I suspect.
Yeah, that question's a book in itself, or 7 books in itself. I have written 7 books, as Alex mentioned. So these kids' book series, and I basically wrote one book per continent. So there's like a North America, South America, Europe, Asia, Africa, Australia, and Antarctica books. And I don't want to do a big plug, but they're on Amazon if anyone wants them. And basically, that's a long story, but basically, to kind of summarize it, I'd done a lot of traveling before I got married. I'd been to about, I would say about 50 plus countries before I got married. And then once I got married, I followed the typical suburban route, right? Like you start to rent a basement, and then from the basement, you eventually borrow from your parents or get some money for the down payment. And we bought a condo, and then we were going to move to a townhome and then a home, kind of that route, the white picket fence with the 2 dogs and the 2 kids, kind of stereotypical American dream or westernized dream that they call it. So we were basically following that. We got married and we had 3 kids in a very short time span. Basically, we had 3 kids within the 5 years. So we had like a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and like a newborn. And here in Canada, we have an amazing maternal leave system. So Canadian women or men, usually it's women, will get like a 1 year maternity leave, but you can split it between parents and get paternity leave. So anyway, my wife was working for Accenture, which is an IT company, and she was able to get 1 year paid vacation for each of the 3 kids. So I actually made the suggestion, like, hey, this might be a last chance to do some major travel before the kids enter, what do you call it? Kindergarten, and then elementary, then high school, then university, right? And it's hard to do like this major 1 year trip when they're in schooling. You can do obviously summer breaks or winter breaks or take a gap year and pull them out of school. But with us, what I suggested, I keep saying it was kind of my inclination to my wife, hey, how about we take this year where you're still getting your salary and I'm working as an entrepreneur, and we can have that flexibility to travel. So what we did is we actually traveled for about a year when our kids were 5, 3, and newborn. My youngest, so it's Rianne, Ryan, Renzo. My youngest is Renzo. He had turned 6 months, so we left when he was 6 months. And of course, another bonus there is the free flights. If kids are 2 and under, you get the free flight. Whereas if they're 2 and over, you got to pay full adult price, which is obviously pretty expensive for a family of 5. So yeah, we had the little guy, and we basically how we did it logistically is my wife usually would put him in a carrier and then would be able to nurse. So whenever he was crying or needed milk, he would just be able to nurse without creating a big fuss or taking him out of the carrier. And I would usually hang out with the 2 older ones. Like I would have one in each arm. So the 5 and 3-year-old, I would be responsible for them. My wife would be responsible for the newborn and feeding and making sure he was not crying and creating a big fuss on airplanes or in buses or trains or wherever we're sightseeing. And yeah, just a quick recap of what we did. So we actually flew from Vancouver, where I'm from, to the Philippines, firstly, because that's where my wife's from, and we spent some time there with her parents and her family. Then we went to Hong Kong, where her brother was. We went to Dubai, where her sister was. Then we went to South Africa. We went to show them these animals, not in the zoo, but in Kruger National Park. So they got to see animals in the wild. That was incredible. Then we went across from Johannesburg to Cape Town. From Cape Town, we flew to Brazil, traveled around Brazil, saw Amazon River. So my 3 kids have gone down the Amazon River. We got to meet the Amazon tribes. We got to see Iguazu Falls, which is actually the biggest waterfalls in the world. Not Niagara Falls, which is near me, but Iguazu, which is actually in South America, which is incredible waterfalls, which not many people talk about in the travel space. So I always try to plug Iguazu. It's amazing. It's between Brazil and Argentina, so you can see it from the Brazilian side or the Argentinian side. Kind of like Niagara, you can see it from the Canadian side or the US side, or like Victoria Falls, Zambia, Zimbabwe. So we did that, traveled South America, traveled Central America. Then my wife's mom got sick with cancer, so we ended up relocating to the Philippines, and We were there for like 4 years. We put our kids in school there, and then they end up learning Tagalog, which is the language of the Philippines. And because, like, we're a mixed family, like I'm Indian and Indian Canadian, and my wife's Filipino, who had immigrated to Canada. So they got to learn about their Filipino identity. I haven't taken them to India, so that's on me. I got to still take them to India and teach them about the Indian ethnicity. And that's definitely one of my goals, is to show them, all these things I've seen in India and where their ancestries come from. So that's a quick little summary of our family trip.
Yeah. And I was visiting a friend yesterday who has a young family,
Mhm.
and he reminded me of early days in mine. And that this is the time of year where kids seem to catch everything uh, going. Um, how important is health for kids, and is it any different based in Canada to say Europe?
Yeah, I think as parents, like, our number one priority is health and happiness for our kids. I think more or less most parents are going to say, "What do you wish for your kids?" I want them to be happy. I want them to be healthy. So we definitely put that as a high priority. We made sure, like, we when we before we left, we told the doctor our plans, intentions. We did have to get some shots because, something like the Amazon, there are potentially some things you could catch, and also in, like, South Africa. So we were cautious and conscious about where we traveled. You have to remember this: every country in the world has hospitals. Yes, surprise, surprise. Yes, they do.
Mm.
In every country in the world, they do have doctors and they have pharmacies. So it's not a Western thing where we have doctors and hospitals. So I think people somehow get a little bit scared, like, oh, what if I have to go to the doctor? What if I have to go to the hospital? Well, it's not much different. You just go to an emergency or go to a clinic and you explain what's happened, and the doctors have good training. Like, they're trained, and you have to obviously go to a good hospital where there's hygienic, you know, because some of the public hospitals, have to agree, they can be dirty and unhygienic. So, and I'm trying to remember, we didn't actually have to go to any, like, major hospitals. There was one incident, I'll quickly explain it to you. We were actually in Manaus, which is like the gateway to Amazon. So that's the city, Manaus. And we were in a shopping mall, and my son was running around, and he tripped and he fell backwards and he bumped his head. And then all of a sudden, like, the Brazilian security, like, came, and they were all speaking Portuguese, which is the language of Brazil. They were asking us, how you're doing. And then we told them we're Canadian, we're not from here. And then one of them spoke enough English to communicate, and they basically, like, rushed us to the, like, he was totally fine, by the way. There was no bleeding or anything, but they were just so afraid that the child had fallen that I didn't even know if this would have happened in Canada. They might have just said, "Hey, are you okay? Oh, you're fine? Okay. If there's any issues, let us know." Whereas these guys, they went above and beyond. They rushed. So me and my other two kids stayed in the mall, and then my wife got rushed with my son to the doctor, and they did checks on him, and he was totally fine. But it just shows you, like, it was such a random accident in a mall in South America, and obviously no one was expecting my son to fall like that. And it just shows you, boom, the locals, like, jumped on it. They found out we're foreigners. They, like, did everything to take care of us. So I'm almost certain, if anything had happened to us at any point in anywhere around the world, people are good, people are kind, and they care about families, they care about kids. And I personally had to have traveled so much, and I've seen the goodness and the kindness of people, that I knew my kids would have been taken care of. So yeah, it's like, I'm getting a little bit emotional about it, but the world is a village, and we're all, like, one. And, like, I would help a kid who is in trouble here, so why wouldn't somebody in Africa or South America help my kids, right? So yeah, I just want to kind of emphasize that for any parents who might have these same fears about travel with kids. Travel, because it's going to change their life, and it will change yours, and you'll just have a different perspective, just like what I'm sharing now. That's a perspective shift, right? If I hadn't traveled, I wouldn't have realized these things I do now.
No, I'm glad you shared that, because that was kind of one of my questions, really, about parents who worry about taking their children abroad. What would they do? And I think you summed it up really well. One thing which appears to be very much a Western thing is that people these days worry about uh, either eating well or eating right, and getting enough um, exercise. I know when I was growing up many years ago that it was quite the opposite. You know, my parents and grandparents had gone from uh, hardly having any food available, uh, and I've kind of lived through. Now you can get almost anything at any time you like. So, do you think there's more that we can be doing for families in terms of helping them make choices?
Yeah. Well, speaking of North America and just Western society in general, we are all stuck with junk food and fast food and processed food and artificial ingredients. Of course, now you can see the shift happening where things are organic and vegan and natural, and you see all the marketing around that because people have realized we're poisoning our kids literally through food, right? Like giving them McDonald's all the time, and obviously advertising Happy Meal. Who doesn't want a Happy Meal? I do, right? So if I do as an adult want a Happy Meal, of course kids will want a Happy Meal. They want their toy, and of course that's bad for them. And even Happy Meals, they're trying to switch from like French fries to pears or apples, or like instead of like sugary drinks, like something more healthier, like like sugary orange juice to like milk. So I think there's a shift. Kind of as North America, but obviously it's kind of hitting the whole world because most of the world has been healthier, more farm to table, and more like healthier food than the Western diet. They say the typical North American diet is just cancer causing or diabetes causing. It's just so bad for you. So in terms of like just the travel piece of this, like I found when we were traveling, we were actually eating healthier, ironically. Like when we were here in Canada, like I just find like we were eating mostly like a lot of junk, like more junk food here. Whereas there, like Asian cuisine is quite healthy, lots of vegetables and like not as much processed or frozen stuff. So yeah, I would just say like, follow the trends of the organic and natural. Make sure that the labels actually are what they're claiming to say, because anything can kind of be skewed or kind of like misinterpreted. So just make sure that if it is natural and organic, it is that. And yeah, obviously there are like health food stores that are focused on that nowadays, which is good. So I'm kind of positive because over the last few decades, obviously, Western cultures tried to kill us, right? And there's so many diseases and so much obesity. That's actually, I don't know, you can speak to the UK, but here in Canada and in America, obesity is like through the roof, and childhood obesity is through the roof. And obesity causes other, connected diseases and shorter lifespan and all that too. So yeah, how is the obesity issues and kind of the disease issues in the United Kingdom? I'd be really curious to hear that.
Well, it certainly does exist. Um, yeah, I'm not sure what can really be done because I don't know. There's a certain normality has formed up around it. So um, yeah, I think it can be quite tricky. I don't know if it's similar in Canada. Is it feel normal for people to be multi-sized?
Unfortunately, yes. You see some double XL, triple XL, quadruple XL sizes, and yeah, it's just scary. And nowadays, you're not allowed to, call them obese or fat or chubby. Like it's kind of like stigma about body size. So yeah, unfortunately, people are struggling with obesity and those kind of issues. However, like here in Vancouver, it's a very like healthy kind of place. Like because for those who have never been here, it's like a city. We have the mountains and we have the water, and they're all within like 30 minutes of each other. So you can literally go skiing and then drive down the mountain 30 minutes to the actual city, and then drive another few minutes to the beach. So within an hour, you can jump from the skiing on a mountain to jumping into the water and the beach, literally in an hour. So it's a pretty cool kind of dynamic here. And because of that, we have a lot of like health options. Like a lot of hiking, a lot of walking, a lot of bike riding. It's a very bike-friendly city here in Vancouver, like bike lanes and shared bike programs. So if you don't have your own bike, you can share bikes, which are regular bikes and also electric bikes if you can't do those hills. And they even have like a shared scooter program now, so you can ride one of those electric scooters around. And yeah, the Stanley Park, which is a famous attraction here, which is a good for like doing a 10-kilometer walk around the perimeter. So it is a very healthy city. So I'm grateful to be living here.
Yeah, well, interesting you mentioned bicycles because I've spoken to uh, another guest who cycled around Europe, and one of the places he mentioned to me in particular was Holland, which is very geared up, uh, no pun intended, for uh, bicycle users. But I think one of the things he said, well, it does help that Holland is quite flat. Um,
Mhm.
but he said there just seemed to be an amazing amount of logic to the way cyclists' lanes were integrated with vehicles and pedestrians. So let's turn to something which is very travel related, and that's digital nomadism. And of course, you already said that you traveled quite a bit whilst you were growing up and when you got married before you had kids. So digital nomadism as a phenomenon, I guess, has been around for a while. I'm not sure how long it's been called that, but when did you feel like you were doing something different to just traveling?
Yeah, and just for people who maybe not so familiar with the terms, I'll just quickly define it. Digital is basically online, and a nomad is traveler. So, like somebody who's able to work online while traveling, right? So they have that ability to be location independent, as they say. So, in terms of that digital nomad journey of mine, I would say like when I was in my 20s and I was traveling, I was more like the budget traveler. I was staying in hostels, I was doing couch surfing, I was doing hospitality club and global freeloaders. These are basically where you just sleep in somebody's couch for free. And then also I was doing like hitchhiking and just traveling as cheaply as I could because I didn't have a lot of funds. And I still don't. But in terms of like when I was getting married and all that, so the term digital nomadism, I think it's been around for, since about 20 years, give or take, like not since the invention of the internet, because the internet was invented, then people had to figure out how to use the internet to make money, right? So me personally, so when I got married, it was in 2011, and then we had our first daughter in 2012. And when I had my daughter, I ended up starting a website called daddyblogger.com. And this website is where I just started writing about my journey as a new father and what to do with kids here in Vancouver, like the aquarium and the zoo, and child-friendly products and services, like the best stroller, the best car seat, the best family-friendly car. So I was writing about a lot of stuff to do with parenting from a father's perspective, because it was mostly mom bloggers who were writing about parenting, not as many dad bloggers. And I happened to have the amazing domain called daddyblogger.com. So because I had that cool domain, I ended up getting a lot of traffic because people would search dad blog, daddy blogger, dad blog, dad blogging about father. Those kind of search terms or Google search results would usually end up I would rank for a lot of different search results to do with fatherhood blogging. So not only did I end up getting a lot of readers, but what ended up happening is I started getting sponsors. So the sponsors would look for, we want a dad blogger to write about our latest like diapers or our latest car seat we've invented that's more aerodynamic and stuff like that, right? Like just fancier and cooler. So these sponsors started like paying me or giving me exchanges. So, hey, we'll give you this product and you write for us. So we'll give you, sometimes it's like $100 or 200 or 500, or they'll fly me places. So I've been flown from like Vancouver to Nashville first class, and I got put in a nice hotel, 5-star, and then I got nice meals and treated like royalty, right? The red carpet thing. And that was by Lexus, shout out to them. So Lexus did that because they wanted me to test drive the latest SUV model, that was for families, right? Like mine, like a upper middle class family. So I would just treat it like luxury. Like whenever there was a brand new restaurant being opened, they would invite us to try out the menu. And when we would go to hotels, they would not just give us a room, they'll give us spa treatment and meals. And when we went sightseeing, we'd get like the hop on hop off bus tours, we'd get like entrance tickets to the museums and to the attractions. So it was amazing. We obviously saved a lot of money that way. So that was like the saving money piece of traveling. So this saving money is making money. So you can imagine like each of those hotels, like 100 to 150 to $200, right? So we're saving that plus some of the flights, plus some of the sightseeing, which could be 40, $50 for just entrance tickets to places, right? So you can add up those per person, right? So it's like me and my wife plus our kids. So that adds up to be a lot of money we saved. And I was also working online, so I was doing a combination of different things. So like I have, as we mentioned, like 7 Amazon books. I also do like online courses teaching people about different parts of internet marketing. So like how to publish a book, how to do public speaking, how to launch your podcast, how to create a YouTube channel, how to like build up your social media following, how to start a blog. So I have like 20 different courses on Udemy. So I had like the books, the online courses. I had the YouTube ad revenue. So I was generating like just over 100 US monthly passive just through the ads that were running there. And then I was doing coaching as well. So just one-on-one coaching, more to do with like business coaching or like social media marketing coaching, marketing consulting. I was doing that. I had a podcast, but the podcast didn't make me money at all, just being truthful. And mastermind groups and just trying different things. And honestly, like some things worked, some things didn't. Sometimes the blog would do better in revenue, sometimes it wouldn't. Sometimes the courses would sell better, sometimes it wouldn't. Those Amazon books, they're kind of like having a lot of cobwebs because they're not selling very well. So, I would say part of being a digital nomad is that trial and error, is the multiple streams of income model. So it might not be just one model where you're just doing coaching or you're just doing web design or graphic design or ESL teaching or whatever you end up doing. It might be having those multiple streams of income, and when one goes down, you can supplement it. And obviously, you need to have some kind of nest egg, like a savings, just in case. Obviously, your income channels are very low. So I would say, that, and I do have a TEDx talk where I talked about like 3 ways to be a digital nomad, and basically to summarize, it's like saving, selling, and serving. First, you got to save through like cutting back expenses and putting money in the travel piggy bank, so to speak, and then selling, like literally you could sell all your stuff, like your house, your car, some of your books or property possessions, like couch, bed, and obviously all that would go towards your travel fund. Or you could rent it out, right? If you have a house or apartment, you could rent it out, which could pay the mortgage if you have it, and then you could travel. If the rental income kind of matches the mortgage or is higher, you could use some of that. And like the travel blogging is another tip to save money. So those are some kind of quick tips for digital nomadism.
Yeah. So on your travels there, would you say that digital nomads get a good deal when they're out and about?
Well, it's not necessarily that they got a good deal. That's more for like the travel bloggers. So the travel bloggers get those incentives. So 2 different things. Like the travel blogger kind of has a skin in the game because we are getting those things like what I mentioned, hotels or sightseeing or transport or food for free. But it's not for free because we're actually doing work, right? We have to write about it, or we got to blog about it, or we got to do a video vlog about it, right? Or we got to do some Instagram shout outs or Twitter shout outs or X shout outs, as they say now, and then putting some Facebook posts about it or some TikToks or Snapchats or whatever your kind of social media influence is on. Then you have to promote whichever tourist destinations or hotels you end up staying in. So that's like the travel blogging side. The digital nomad side is basically, it's up to you, right? You got to like earn money while you're traveling. So you don't necessarily get any perks or, advantages that the travel blogger has. So ideally you can combine the 2, and travel blogging is kind of a subcategory of digital nomadism. And some travel bloggers do earn money, and some just get that kind of exchange of goods and services for promotion. And I think most travel bloggers do something else. Like they might have their own product that they're selling on Amazon or eBay or Shopify. They might have like some kind of side gig, like maybe web design, graphic design, or virtual assistants kind of work. So that's from what I know from the travel blogger community. I know they usually do blogging plus some kind of digital nomad income stream.
Mm, yeah, yeah. You have to be multidisciplinary, don't you? If
Totally.
you're a traveler. One thing I noticed recently is that several countries now are developing their own visa system, aren't they, specifically for digital nomads? But the rules seem to be vary enormously. What have you noticed about that?
Yeah, I haven't used those visa schemes particularly because we weren't like staying long times in a lot of those countries. Those digital nomad tourist visas usually allow longer term stay. So, for example, a country might have like a 1 month tourist visa, whereas a digital nomad may be able to stay 3 months, 6 months, a year, or more. And sometimes it can lead to residency. So sometimes you need to prove that you have a certain amount in your bank account, you have a certain income through pay stubs or some kind of PayPal receipts or some kind of proof of income. Sometimes it's just you declare it, you're a digital nomad, and you can get the visa because some of these countries want to get more foreigners in and more international revenue into the country. And there's also like the tax kind of issue related to that, right? Like, so if you're working online, where do you pay taxes, or do you pay taxes, or if you don't, then who are you going to be in trouble with? So that there's ramifications there. And when you're traveling, like, do you need to pay your taxes to your home country or your country where your passport's located in, or where you get the benefits, right? So there's obviously a whole bunch of issues there, legal and tax. And I'm obviously not expert, and I'm not going to claim any authority on all those or give advice on those issues for protecting myself. So I would just say, check with your accountant and make sure everything's legally up to par.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned that you ran a podcast interviewing lots of digital nomads. So what was your inspiration to even begin that? And
Yeah, I love kind of like what you do. I love to talk travel. So just like this conversation is amazing. Like I'm not getting any money from it, or I don't need to promote stuff. I just enjoy talking to travel. It's just like we're at a coffee shop and hanging out and sharing travel stories, right? So I love talking travel with people and also learning their stories. And just through the conversations, I learned so much info about their life and about new places around the world and kind of like hacks to travel cheaper, or just amazing adventures and mishaps and everything in between. So, yeah, I think I started it for connecting with other people who are doing something similar to me, because sometimes it can be lonely as well when you're on the road, and people don't understand this whole travel blogging digital nomad thing, whereas other digital nomads or other travelers, we get it, right? So it was I think it was just for the purpose of connecting with people, learning, and also creating a community. And speaking of the income thing, there's a saying in business: your network is your net worth. I'll repeat it: your network, your community is your net worth. So when you're doing this kind of thing, like either creating a social media community or like a podcast community or a YouTube community, you're creating a network. And because I'm a travel blogger, that's also advantage to me, because I can leverage those statistics. Like I can say I have these X number of followers on the social media, X number of podcast subscribers, listeners, right? And that's clout to get more stuff. So yes, it can serve a purpose, like kind of a selfish purpose to get free stuff. But I don't, in kind of complete transparency, I didn't do it for that reason. Even if I didn't get anything from it, like I would just be blessed by talking to people. And a lot of the times I wouldn't necessarily like mention those numbers at the beginning until I got big following. But it was incredible, that journey of being a podcaster. I got kind of hooked on it. I was interviewing like 2-3 guests a day, and I would just like going gung ho, like, hey. And whenever I talk to someone, I'll be like, hey, Alex, do you know anyone else I could interview, or do you know any other cool travelers, right? So then Alex would tell me two or three, and then those two or three would tell me more, and then it was a big spider web of a network that I created. And of course, I could like visit them, and I have connections with a lot of them on Facebook now. Like I went from being like podcast guest and host to like Facebook friends, and then potentially visit them if I visit their countries. Like if I go to Alex's country, I'm sure he would welcome me, and if he comes to Vancouver, I'd be happy to show him around. So it's a great way of just connecting, making friends, and developing that incredible community. So my podcast is called Digital Nomad Mastery, and I have like 500 plus episodes, and it's on the different podcast directories. So yeah, take a look if you're wanting even more content than the amazing content Alex is giving you.
So what's the I guess when you've talked to so many people, it's difficult to make a choice, but do any experiences stand out from the conversations that you've had?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. I don't know if anyone's asked me that question. Yes, I would say like when I heard stories from like 500 plus people, and these are not just people, they're like actual digital nomads who are figured out this crazy conundrum of working and traveling, which is obviously a hard thing to do logistically with internet issues, and like we mentioned, the kind of like the political visa tax kind of issues. So it's just cool to talk to these kind of like kind of unique kind of people. Things that stood out are like I found like the people who are doing kind of unique creative things, like especially like volunteer based projects. Like I found that quite fascinating, the people who are doing stuff to like save the environment, or like they're doing orphanage projects. I'll give you an example, like a guy named Tom. You've heard of the kind of the 80 days around the world concept, or the journey, right? 80 days around the world. So instead of doing 80 days around the world, he did 80 anthems around the world with his daughter. So they traveled around the world to 80 different countries, and they did 80 different anthems. And it's just kind of like a unique kind of spin on the 80 days, right? So like the kind of just unique stories like that. Like, of course, like other families obviously all inspire us as well, like because that's hard logistically when you have kids. And yeah, sometimes I've like connected with like older, like maybe people in the 70s, 80s, and they're still traveling. And I'm like, I'm 47, so I'm like, if I'm 70 and 80 and even 90, like I'd love to keep traveling, right? And just just the different varieties of types of travel is also kind of unique. So some people do the couch surfing, just staying on hostels. Some people just do hitchhiking, which is incredible. Like some people do, like you mentioned, the long bike ride across Europe, and some people bike ride from Alaska to Argentina, which is a crazy journey. And those kind of either the walks across countries or like the bike rides, or kind of those are like unique elements of travel. So that those kind of uniqueness stands out. Yeah.
Mm. You mentioned that there are the numbers of challenges, aren't there, living this particular lifestyle? You mentioned loneliness. Do you think a lot of people struggle with the changes of routine when they begin this journey of a lifetime?
Yeah, 100%. Like I think for the most part, people do struggle with that. I mean, some people are variety preferred, like some people like routine, some people like variety. It's not so much the change of the routine. I think it's the change of the relationships, because you'll make like such deep friendships. You'll travel through Bruges or Amsterdam together. You'll bike the canals in Amsterdam, and then you'll form these really deep friendships. You'll share intimate moments with each other over the campfire or at the hostel lounge, and through these adventures that you just spontaneously end up doing together. And then you lose connection with them fully. You go from like being their best friend one day to like next you find a new best friend, next new best friend. And obviously that's very hard on the relational perspective, because when you're building up a relationship, somehow your heart and your mind and your relationship is connected, right? So there's like a connection, and then you separate, then you connect again, separate, connect again. So somehow in the psyche, it can do some, I don't want to use the word damage, but some kind of, it can have a maybe slightly negative effect on you if you keep doing that over and over and over. Because we are formed to be part of a community. And even when we're doing this kind of like lonely lifestyle, you still create community through hostels, which are amazing for community building, obviously, or Airbnbs. And even Airbnbs is kind of like a cool way to travel nowadays, because you get that home-like atmosphere where you're staying in a suburb. You have a kitchen, you got a living room, you got a balcony, you got neighbors, right? So even Airbnbs kind of mimic home. So I think, and of course now we have social media where we can stay connected, right? Which is amazing. However, I do think there's like you mentioned, the loneliness, a challenge, and that leads to some kind of mental health struggles. And a lot of travelers do travel because of their mental health struggles. They face some depression or some anxiety or some family conflict or a breakup. You heard of the famous Eat, Love, Pray, I'm sure, right? Like the lady gets divorced and she travels to Italy and India, and she seeks to find worship or prayer, and then eating is the food and love is the romance, right? So I think that's not, and that's why probably that book and the movie did so well, because it's not a solitary story that one lady had, Elizabeth Gilbert, but it's kind of like our kind of story. Like for me, when I first traveled, it was because I'd asked a girl out, she'd rejected me, I'd gone through depression, and I just needed to get away, man. So I got away, and that was my healing, right? And then when I'd become a suburbanized dad, I'd fall into a depression. And when we traveled, it opened me up and it enlivened me and brought back my passions and spark and wonder and joy and awe, which I'd lost, right? So I think there's kind of like a healing component. I know we're kind of going on a tangent, but there's kind of a healing component to travel. And like people who struggle with depression like myself, or a lot of the world is kind of struggling with mental health. Travel is a great anecdote and like much better than an antidepressant. I don't want to like speak to that too much. This is a doctor issue, but travel just on a kind of like a very personal level really helped me with my own depression, my own anxiety, my own mental health struggles, and my own sense of connection. So there's some good things, you know, that loneliness thing, but also like the cure for mental health. So there's a long answer to a short question.
Well, it nicely leads to something I've heard fairly regularly, and that is that when people eventually go home, suddenly they see a different country. Do you ever get that feeling going back to Canada after you've been away?
All the time. Yes, Alex. It's called reverse culture shock. So basically, you'll travel and like I've done quite a few journeys that are kind of like irregular. Like it's not the typical like 2-week vacation come back. So I've done like these journeys that are longer term. So I'll give you an example. Like from the year 2001 to 2008, I hadn't stepped foot in Canada once. In 2001, I flew to Japan. I taught English there. Then after teaching English there, I traveled through Asia, down into Australia. I ended up doing a working holiday, then ended up studying there. And then 2008, I returned to Canada. So from the period I entered Japan and left Australia, I hadn't returned to Canada once. So that was like 7 years outside of my country of birth. And then the other period was like when I traveled with my family, then moved to the Philippines. That was another long period where I was not in Canada once, from like 2016 December till like 2022 September. So another like 6 year. So like 7 years plus 6 years, right? That's like 13 years, like outside of Canada, out of my 47 years, plus like, some other kind of random trips here and there. So travel culture shock is a real thing. So what I'll just speak on my own behalf. Like when I came back to Canada, like I'll give you the example, the 2008 one. When I went to Japan, taught there, traveled Asia, spent time in Australia, working holiday, and then studying. Then I came back. It was very, 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 very difficult, very challenging, because I had changed and I felt no one else had changed. It's not true, because everyone does change. It's inevitable, right? But probably not to the same or similar degree. I was changing through the travel, and they were changing because they were getting older and they had their own life experiences and all that. So I just found it hard to connect. And obviously I couldn't share. I could share, but people would just kind of start tuning out when I started explaining about random places, because they couldn't, if they hadn't been there. And it's different, because like for me, if somebody's explaining somebody haven't been, I'd be like so like glued to glued to the person and like, oh, tell me more. And how did you do this? And what was the highlight, right? Whereas some people, they might just kind of glaze over and just listen for the sake of politeness. So just connecting with people I found difficult, and I had to make a whole different type of friendships. And I joined and created different travel type of communities. So I started something here in Vancouver called YVR Travelers, and YVR is just the airport code, YVR Travelers, but it's called kind of like a play on words. Why are we travelers? YVR Travelers. And so I created a community and I started doing meetups, and every month there would be a different speaker talking about different country in the world. Like someone would mention about travel to Mexico, or someone would talk about travel to Papua New Guinea, or travel or teaching English in China or South Korea or Japan, or doing kind of like farm stays or woofing, or like just kind of unique parts of travel. Some people talked about like LGBT travel, or like single female travel, or like family travel in my case, right? So I created these meetups and I created a community to deal with that kind of issue I was having, because when I create these travel communities, guess what happens? It's like a magnet. I drew in people that are similar to me, right? And that helped. So if you can't find a community, create one, but most likely you can find one. If you go to meetup.com and just type in like travel community in whatever city or province or state or area you're in, and that would help with the travel culture shock. And maybe like, for example, connecting with, like, say I lived in Japan, so I learned some Japanese, I learned a lot about the culture. So if I connect with other Japanese people or other Australians because I lived there, that helped as well with that readjustment process. So yeah, those are some tips for the dealing and handling that reverse culture shock.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's good to know. So, do you think it's as easy today to start a journey of being a digital nomad as it's always been?
Even easier. I think it's getting easier and easier because there's more and more ways to make money, right? Like literally, like every day, people are always creating apps and putting stuff on Amazon. So there's the tried and true ways to make money, like things like web design, graphic design, things like ESL teaching, or teaching any language. Like if you can teach Japanese or Korean or Russian or Arabic, like you can teach these languages online, and somebody's going to want to learn them, and they're willing to pay for it, right? If you have some kind of expertise in an area, you can do coaching, you can do online courses on almost anything, right? Like if you know how to cook, teach other people, and create a YouTube channel and get some followers, and start getting ad revenue. And so I think it's getting easier and easier because there's more and more avenues and resources and ways to learn. And the best way to learn is to ask somebody who's done it before or is doing it currently. And there's plenty of resources on YouTube and Udemy, like online courses on for this. There's books obviously on Amazon and Kindle. But just talking to people, people who have done it or are doing it, we love to just share. Like for me, I'm just an open book. If people ask me questions, I just rattle on and on and on, right? So ask other people who have done. Like that's what I did, by the way. When I first left with my wife and kids on the big adventure, I actually started interviewing a lot of parents who'd done travel because I was more scared, obviously, when I was not just traveling by myself with my wife and these 3 children that I don't want to obviously put at risk or harm. So I asked 4 or 5. I didn't ask lots and lots, but I asked like 4 or 5 key kind of the main travel influences in the family space. Like there was Erin Bender, for example, Travel Bender and Explore with Erin, and there was like the King's family, and there's like a few family bloggers who I just kind of asked, "Hey, can I ask you some questions?" And they were just open books like me, right? They just said, "What questions do you have? We can jump on a Zoom or a WhatsApp call." And yeah, I would just say look online for help and ask others for help.
Yeah, well, that's good advice. So, talking about the wider world,
Mhm.
you've obviously lived and worked in many different places. You've visited a good number of countries. I think 80 plus. I think you
Yep.
mentioned. So, I've got to ask, how long did it take to visit 81 countries?
Mhm. Yeah. How long is a hard question to answer because it took me like 40 plus years, right? So I think it was like 2018 where I hit the 81. In the last 4 years, I haven't traveled to new countries, so I'm kind of missing the boat there. I got to jump on a cruise ship and hit some of those Caribbean countries I've missed, or I got to do a lot. And now that I've hit 81, those countries that I have left a little bit harder, like a lot of them are in like Africa, or like there's 54 countries in Africa, and I've only been in two of them. I've been to like Egypt and I've been to South Africa. So I have like 52 countries in Africa. I have like 20 plus countries still to go in Eastern Europe. I haven't done a lot of Eastern Europe yet. I have quite a few of those difficult Middle Eastern countries, which are war torn, like Iran, Iraq, and Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia. Look, I haven't gone to that area. So yeah, there's still like kind of like a lot of kind of difficult countries that I haven't gone to. But in terms of like how long it took me, so like 40 plus years, and they've been like kind of different journeys. So like when I did the Europe thing, I did like a lot. And obviously Europe's great because you can do a lot of countries in a shorter amount of time without visa issues and much complications, especially Western Europe. So you can do like 20 countries fairly easily in Europe, Western Europe. And then I did that Asia trip, which I mentioned, like the Japan overland into like a lot of Southeast Asia. So that's fairly easy, quote unquote. And that's kind of like one of the famous backpacker routes, traveling from Thailand to Laos to Vietnam to Cambodia, down into Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, East Timor. So that area is fairly easy to do. South America, Central America is also fairly easy to do because you got your Mexico, then you got Belize, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Panama. So that could be like another 8 countries. Then South America, you have 12 countries, but it's bigger countries. Like Argentina is a big country, Brazil is a big country, Chile is a big long country. Whereas there are these small countries that are kind of easy to go from one to another, like Colombia, Venezuela, French Guyana, and in Suriname, those countries like you can kind of go through quicker. So that how long question is kind of a complicated one. It depends on where in the world you go, how easy is it to get the visas in those places, and kind of like the logistics of travel between countries. Are you going to fly? Are you going to bus? Are you going to rent a car and drive from country to country? You're going to hitchhike from country to country, right? And then the size of the countries matters, like Australia, Canada, they're such big countries, right? So have you done them? If you've been to like Sydney, have you done Australia? Of course not. It's one city within a huge country, right? So even though I've like circled the whole perimeter of Australia, I don't think I've done it because there's like so many like nicks, like we mentioned, nooks and crannies within these countries, or every country. So yeah, it takes a long time just to see even one country, let alone one world, one globe.
Yeah, no, that's what makes it such a fascinating thing to do. And it's I always say that travel is a universal language which many of us understand.
Yeah.
So you've had the privilege of living abroad on a number of occasions. Would you say that you've had to overcome challenges living in different countries? Can you give a few examples?
Yeah, of course, Alex. Yeah, so just kind of to summarize my own kind of living abroad journey. So yeah, born and raised here in Vancouver, taught English in Tokyo, Japan, and Osaka, Japan. Did waiting and bartending in London, England, United Kingdom. I also spent time working as like a call center, and I was doing like those charities on the street. Like I would be like signing up people. Do you want to give to Greenpeace today? Do you want to donate money to Greenpeace? Or I was doing charity fundraising, which is great for rejection and overcoming, insecurities, because you're literally like I would be like in Sydney, Australia, on this main street, and I would be stopping people who are going to work or busy getting to their appointment, and I'd be like, "Hey, do you have a minute to support Greenpeace?" And it was tough, but it built up some character. So I did that. So I worked in North America. I worked in Europe, in England, and then I worked in Asia and Japan, and I worked in Australia and Sydney. So I have not worked in Africa, and I have not worked in South America, and obviously have not been or worked in Antarctica. So yeah, out of the continents I've been and worked, I've been to 6 of the 7 continents in terms of travel, and traveled to 81 other countries. And out of just a little trivia, there's 193 United Nations member states, and there's some kind of ambiguous ones like Taiwan and Vatican, like where do they fall into kind of thing, right? So Palestine, etc. We won't go there into those political conversations. So yeah, in terms of like kind of your question about what are the challenges of actually living in a country as opposed to visiting. So when you're living there, you got to open up bank accounts and you got to like deal with kind of like the language issues, and you're not like a tourist, but you are. You're able to build up friendships on a longer term basis. You're able to understand the country and the culture, and the political system, like kind of the customs and uniqueness, the food. You're able to know the place more because you're there longer. Just the amount of time will lead to that, and of course, when you're building up the better and deeper local friendships, you're also getting to know the local culture and customs too. I haven't had many issues there. I think the major issues were like in Japan, obviously learning the language. Most people don't speak English. It's changing nowadays, obviously, because English is the global language nowadays, and younger people doing homestays in Canada, like Canada or Australia, or even in the United Kingdom or America, right? They're doing homestays. But in general, like the kind of the older crowd, I found was harder. In general, like they didn't learn English in school, so it's harder for them, and they grew up before the internet was invented. So it's maybe potentially they didn't have as exposure to English as the universal global language. So yeah, I would say like if I can kind of think of those 4 countries I lived in, England, obviously, you guys speak English just like us, and Australia, of course, speak English just like us. So those weren't hard, but Japan was probably the most challenging. And also it's just a very unique and different culture. So not only on a language basis, but just on an interaction, because the people can be quite shy and timid, and it takes a while to kind of break the shell or the outer exterior and to get to know that person intimately and vulnerably. So yeah, those were some of the challenges I would say I had. However, the best way to overcome those challenges is to try to connect with locals. And you'll always find locals who want to meet foreigners who have been to lived overseas, so they're kind of travel minded. So when I was living there, I was teaching English. So I was in an environment where those Japanese people were the type of people who wanted to do business overseas or travel overseas or connect with foreigners, right? So that's the reason they were learning English at the English school. But when I was like going to restaurants and I was like reading the menu and it's all kanji or katakana or hiragana, and I'm like, there's no pictures. I'm like, man, I'm getting some more gray hairs here just looking at this menu. You just have to memorize how to see chicken and beef and pork and rice and noodles and the basics. And if you just mention, I want yakisoba or something like that, like they'll get it, or you can find somebody who will speak English at the restaurants and all that. But I found, China was hard as well to travel. I hadn't lived there, but I found that quite hard to travel in terms of travel, language, logistics, the size of the country. Like writing was not always in the English type of characters. South America, I found surprisingly hard too. I was traveling there, and I thought a lot of more people speak English, but most people speak Spanish only. And we were struggling there, and this time was with my wife and kids in like Brazil, Portuguese speaking, and those South American countries and Central American countries. So there was challenges there. Usually you'll have some kind of stuff, language, cultural differences. Yeah.
But of course, the upside, of course, is that you're taking in a new location, aren't you, and absorbing new experiences, which hopefully made up, or more than made up, for any challenges you faced.
Sure.
I guess it's an impossible question, but out of all the countries you visited, would you say you have favorites or ones that, oh yeah, I wouldn't mind going back there again?
Alex, that's like the forbidden question. It's like Alex asking me, Ricky, you have 3 kids. You have Rianne, you have Ryan, you have Renzo. Which one's your favorite, Ricky? It's like, I'm not going to answer that question, you know. But in the travel question, I like that question because I also ask that question to others as well. I'm curious about, like Alex, you can answer if you want later about what's your favorite country. Or even the harder question is like, what's your least favorite country? Because then you're potentially on rocky soil there, because you might say you don't like X country, and then the people listening are like, what? He's a racist, or how can you not like a country, or something like that. So I try to avoid the least liked country. My favorite country is like so hard to explain, but I love Japan. Like it was one of the hardest, but it was one of the most rewarding experience of my life. Like if you see all my username and my email, it's always tokyoricky. You might have noticed that, like when we were emailing back and forth, it's tokyoricky on Facebook and all that. Because like when I was living there, I lived in Tokyo and I fell in love with the culture and the language and the people. So Japan is like a deep personal spot in my heart. I also really like Tibet. It's a part of China. There's obviously some political issues with Tibet, but I found that to be a very unique place to travel because not a lot of people get to Tibet. Whereas, like when you say Thailand or Bali, or like a lot of the travel people have been to Thailand or France, Paris, and all that, right? So those places aren't as unique or mysterious or don't have the allure. Whereas like Tibet has such a uniqueness and allure. So quickly, I traveled like overland through China into Lhasa, which is the capital of Tibet. It's like one of the highest elevation cities in the world. And when you're getting to Lhasa, Tibet, you got to take some altitude sickness pills, or you just have to like sleep, or because you're kind of spacey and you kind of like, you could walk into a wall and just kind of like pass out. Literally, you could pass out because of the altitude. So yeah, it takes a little bit of adjustment to get to Lhasa. And then when I got to Lhasa, I hooked up with 5 other travelers, and we rented like this, or did like this shared expense SUV 4x4 trip from Lhasa to Kathmandu. So we were traveling Tibet, Nepal, over the Himalayas. It was one of the most beautiful scenes I've ever seen. Scenes I've seen. From Tibet to Nepal through the Himalayas, and stopping at Everest Base Camp and sleeping overnight in the base camp. And we didn't do the full trek, but we traveled from the base camp to kind of close to the base of the mountain. So we saw the cone of Everest, and we got to experience Everest. And the people are incredible in Tibet. They have like this cool like wrinkles that are shaped by the environment, and they have like unique faces. So you're almost studying them and wanting to learn about their cool, unique stories. So there's that, and there's the food's quite incredible. The people are hospitable. Yeah, I would say Tibet also holds a very special place in my heart. And I would say, lastly, in terms of my 3 favorites has become now, is South Africa. You hear like, it's dangerous and don't go there. And like, even my wife's family, they were so nervous. Like, why are you taking your kids to South Africa? And my wife also like didn't know much about it. And for me, I'd heard so much about it. So I was like, I was the gung-ho person. When we got there, it was so safe and so like friendly. Like, they're going to be dangerous places anywhere. Like, you're not going to walk to the area with like a lot of drug or gangs late at night, like that, or you're not going to have a lot of bling bling jewelry and cameras and maps. That you're not like, that's just a wise thing not to do, right? To kind of fit in and blend in. But yeah, I would say South Africa is one of my other favorites because it's so unique in terms of the geography, the animals, right? You can see the big 5: the lion, the giraffe, the elephant, the rhino, leopard, etc. So those animal safaris were incredible. And like Cape Town is one of my favorite cities. Cape Town is probably, it's kind of like vying up there with Rio de Janeiro and Sydney, Australia, in terms of just aesthetic beauty. Like Sydney Harbor is wow. And then Rio de Janeiro is quite wow. And then Cape Town is wow. Like you have Table Mountain, and you have the water, and then the city. It is, yeah. So I could talk about this question forever, and we could almost have a part 2 where we got to go into all this. But yeah, to summarize, I would say Japan, Tibet, South Africa, and more are my favorites. You got to answer the question, Alex. We haven't heard much from you, but what's your favorite?
Well, mine is a bias because I have family living in Australia, so it's the one country I've been to more than any other, and yet you feel that it's you've only scratched the scratch. Um, I love the Aussies. I love their sense of humour, their sarcasm. They won't mind me saying that because they give as good as they get. No, I just find it a fascinating country. And actually, um, people say that the UK is full of, has a lot of diversity, but Australia too has it. It's just at a larger scale. That's really the main difference. I think they have just as much variety in landscape as most places. And you're right. I think certain locations do have a very big wow factor, and they clearly draw the most people to them. And one thing I wanted to ask you was, do you think there's a lot these days on social media? Social media is getting much bigger in terms of influencing people, and particularly from a travel perspective. Do you think we're turning into sort of a world of two camps? Sort of the places the crowds go to, and everyone else.
Yeah. Yeah, wonderful question, Alex. Yes, social media is influential, right? So we have a term called social media influencers, digital influencers, YouTube influencers. You're a podcast influencer because you're creating influence in the podcast world, right? So travel influencers, etc. So yes, you'll see kind of like very typical places that get a lot of coverage. Bali being one of them, Thailand, of course. Paris is obviously always going to get coverage. Is the romantic city, one of the most romantic cities in the world. So there are going to be these types of travelers who want to go because others have gone there. Like I'm thinking about that picture in Bali of like the reflection of the temple, and then there's like it looks like almost like two of you. People always want that picture there, or like in Vietnam, like there's like this arm where people are climbing onto the hand, and people get pictures there. People obviously going to always want to take pictures of the seven wonders, like Machu Picchu. People want pictures with the pyramids. People want to have pictures of Stonehenge, where you're not too far from. People are going to want pictures of them scaling or walking the Great Wall of China, and of course also Taj Mahal, one of the most magnificent buildings or architectural wonders of the world. Dubai obviously is hot right now. Like people want to go to Dubai. Like this has come out of the desert literally in the last 15 years. Like Dubai, when I was in my 20s, I didn't even know that existed. And now Dubai is like this hot place with the biggest, the fastest, the tallest, like the fastest roller coaster in the world, which is in Abu Dhabi. I did it. It's like the Ferrari roller coaster. Then you have the tallest building in the world, tallest tower in the world, the Burj Khalifa. Then you have all these other things that are being built there that are kind of like the superlatives of travel. So people see other people doing these things and they want to jump on it, right? And it depends on what kind of traveler you are, or are like, for example, people who like scuba diving, when they see people at the Great Barrier Reef or in Dahab in Egypt, like that's a famous snorkeling and diving place, like they'll be drawn to that. So yeah, I mean, I suffer from that too when I see like a place that, like for example, for me it's Antarctica. Like I'll see other travel bloggers who will go to Antarctica and they'll get it fully funded, and I'll be just like, oh man, I can't wait to go there, because it's like a $5,000 trip. You go from the bottom of Argentina, Ushuaia, take a cruise through like the ocean or the sea down into Antarctica. You land there, you go hang out with the penguins, get your pictures, and of course, I'd love to do that because that would be my seventh continent, and just it's the most remote, one of the most remote places on this planet. So I get envy or jealous, or because I see those social media posts you alluded to. However, I think there'll be people who always want to do off the beat and run, right? Like okay, everyone else is going to let's say Bali or Thailand. Well, let's go to Laos or Cambodia or like kind of like Burma or Myanmar or Bangladesh, or like some places that aren't as touristy. Like for example, like Sri Lanka is amazing, and so is Bangladesh. But a lot of people just go to India and Nepal because they are more famous, right? Bangladesh it's not on the top of everyone's bucket list to go to Bangladesh, right? Like I haven't heard that once. So whereas it's an amazing country, and people aren't used to like foreigners. For me, it's a little bit harder because I fit into Bangladesh because I'm Indian and brown skin. Whereas you, Alex, or somebody who's Caucasian or who is a different complexion than a Bangladeshi person, the Bangladeshis want pictures with you. They like all over you, right? So off the beaten path is like my recommendation. Off the beaten path is more rewarding, but it can be also more challenging as well.
Yeah, I think I would say I'm a little bit of a mixture. And
Mm.
I've been surprised actually where on earth feel that you stand out. I did a trip to Malaysia, Eastern Malaysia. Everybody goes to West, but hardly anybody goes to the eastern side.
Yeah.
And I had people come up to me holding my cheeks because they'd never seen someone from out of town. So it's quite an interesting experience. So, in terms of travel choices, would you say you are someone who likes planning, or do you like unplanned? What kind of travel are you?
Yeah, you asked the best questions, Alex. That's another complex and multifaceted question. I think when I first went to Europe in my 20s as a novice, rookie, kind of green traveler, I was definitely more of the planner. I was literally researching every single museum and all the different artwork that I was going to see at the Louvre and all the different castles I would see in England. And then when I went to Europe, I was like, not another castle, not another cathedral, not another museum. Whereas for a Canadian, those are such unique things, right? Like we don't have castles and cathedrals to the degree you guys have in Europe. So I definitely did do a lot of planning early in my travel career or with my early travel days. So much over planning everything. Whereas now I'm such a spontaneous, go with the flow, wing it kind of traveler. My wife didn't like that as much. She's much more the planner person. So a little bit of spontaneity is good. I think what you need to do is like plan for things like the major things. It's good to plan for like the flights, for example. You don't want to be waiting last minute. You don't want to be waiting last minute for flights because guess what? You're going to be paying more money for flights. So the major things like the flights, obviously, it'll be good to book in advance or when the special deals are on. Little hack is obviously getting travel points like those miles and credit cards to save on those travel costs. The actual day-to-day kind of sightseeing, I think those things you can do spontaneously because those things depend on different factors because they might be a museum that's open every Friday or every Monday, right? And they might be like holidays, like, kind of provincial or national holidays that you don't even know of until you get there. Of course, the weather is a huge factor, right? You don't want to be taking beautiful pictures of Machu Picchu when it's all clouded over and then you're trying to get pictures of the Machu Picchu citadel, and it's all only clouds, right? So you got to kind of, when you are doing those kind of big things, you might want to like book an extra day or two. And of course, there's the inevitable getting sick when you're traveling, right? Delhi belly is almost inevitable when you're in India, right? You're going to get sick because it's a little bit unhygienic, a lot of places. So I think you have to kind of plan for the unplanned. Like I mentioned, the weather is the planning for the unplanned, and getting the sick is the planning for the unplanned. And yeah, just kind of the other stuff. I would say be safe with getting vaccines before you go to like parts of Africa for malaria and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, the rest I think you can figure out as you go. And some of the best things is when you talk to locals and you're there and you join Facebook groups and people recommend stuff like a local taxi driver will say something, a local restaurant or cafe will recommend something, and you go there and you just have that special, unique, me only, not Lonely Planet experience, right? So yeah, I think combination is probably my way and more leaning to spontaneous.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, I I I always think of spontaneity as something that you're more likely to remember the spontaneous than the planned.
Yeah.
So, anyway, so the last thing I always like to ask people is how do you think travel is going to change?
Yeah, that's the one. These questions I haven't, and you obviously didn't give me the questions before, so I'm kind of spontaneously trying to figure out these answers. How is travel going to change? I think one of the things I've heard is like, I just heard a statistic, or I read one, like, for the first time in human history, like 5 billion people have stepped on foot or airplane or had their first flight or something, like crazy stat like that. Like, there are a lot of people who obviously never ever jumped on an airplane, even places in America and Canada, they just for poverty or just lifestyle choice. And of course, especially in poorer parts of the world, I don't want to say third world, uh, kind of developing or developed, kind of countries that are like poorer on the economic scale. People can barely leave their village, right? And they barely can afford food to eat. So I think some shifts will happen. More and more people will be able to afford to travel. Before, it was a luxury of the rich, right? Like only the rich could travel. And now, in at least North America and Western societies like Europe and Australia, these kind of areas of the world, most middle class people and even people on the lower income scale can do some travel. It could be just road trips. It could like be what do you call it? Domestic in their own country kind of travel. Or it could be international, like jumping on an airplane kind of travel. Or some international, you don't need to jump on an airplane. You can just cross over, like in Europe, and Canada, US, obviously the border, you can just drive across. So yeah, I think the frequency of travel will increase, and I think the other kind of shift will be the unique type of travel, because people are always hungry for the new, the novel, the different, the special, the unknown. So if people are all going to, like, I've mentioned several times in this interview, by Paris, Bali, Bangkok, Thailand, kind of like the famous places, like even London, of course, New York City is a big bucket list place, and kind of the seven wonder kind of places. So I think people are wanting to kind of do things that are different, and like we've seen these shifts. Like there was like the shift to like from hostels to Airbnbs, and people wanting to like live like a local. And now volunteerism is a big trend, I find, as well. So the giving back aspect of travel. So people travel and they'll do like mission work or relief work, or go and build houses, and that's their travel, right? They're going to Guatemala and they're helping the locals with irrigation or agriculture or whatever specialization they have. They might do healthcare, they might do animal conservation projects. So I think, yeah, another trend is volunteerism. And yeah, I think that digital nomad trend is kind of I don't want to use the word fad or trend, but I think it's a longing and a desire for, especially a lot of young people. You have the stereotypical, 20-year-old digital nomad with their laptop sitting on the beach, which most digital nomads don't sit on the beach and work, because they're going to get sand all over their $3,000 MacBook Air or whatever, right? So most people aren't doing that, but that's the stereotypical image of a digital nomad. So I think people are going to find creative ways to save. I think money is obviously going to be always the big barrier to travel with anyone of any age, right? Like, so people are going to find creative ways to travel. There's like home exchanges, for example, right? Like I can exchange with you. I could be like going to live with Alex's place there, and he could go live in my place, and it's just a exchange. So we're not paying each other; we're just staying. And sometimes it'll happen concurrently or on different times. There's house sitting, pet sitting, kind of new, unique ways of traveling, right? So you can go to a house and get paid to take care of the dogs or the cats or the bunny rabbits and the plants, right? So yeah, those are some of the things that I think are kind of cutting edge trends in travel.
Do you have any favorites yourself? Is there something you personally would make a difference for you?
Yeah. I really like volunteerism. There's kind of different ways of looking at volunteerism, and basically to define it, just like traveling and volunteering simultaneously, or you're almost like going there for the purpose of volunteering alone, and you might not even see any kind of sites. You might just do the volunteering and then head back home. It can kind of do more damage, or it can be kind of more like almost more benefiting the traveler than the actual local, because there's a lot of logistics in planning a Westerner to go to like a third world country and do the building, whereas you could just get a local person who'll do it. So sometimes it can be vanity kind of thing. I don't want to speak on it on behalf of everyone, because everyone's motives are unique to them, right? So But I think generally, if we can do some kind of altruistic activity, I heard a great example. Like just somebody was saying, like if you're traveling and you have like a shirt pocket and you just put like a $20 bill, and instead of giving that $20 bill, you try to figure out a way to bless somebody. It might be buying some flowers, or be buying like some groceries. It might be doing something rather than just giving the $20, doing some kind of like special thing when you're traveling, which is not technically volunteerism. It's more like a random act of kindness, but it's a different type of travel rather than taking the Instagram and the selfies and filling your Facebook or your Instagram feed with the latest pictures, right? So if you can do like some human impact project or activity without the picture to prove that you've done it. There's a famous saying, don't let your left hand know what your right hand's doing. Just keep it to yourself. Do the act. Don't shout it out over the internet. Don't have to tell anyone. Just keep it personal between what you've done and the person you've done it to. And I think for me as people, like some people love animals. I like animals, but I don't love them to the sense I would do a lot of projects around animals or the environment. I would do those things, but I like people-centric things. So yeah, like what we've done is like, things like orphanages. And that was really good for my kids. I'll give you a quick example. We were in Medellin, Colombia, which is known as the city of eternal spring. It's like close to Bogota, the capital. So we went to Medellin, and I was staying there with my kids in an orphanage. So these orphans have no mom and dad, and they're being taken care of like the workers at the orphanage. And my kids didn't have the understanding because they have a mom and dad, right? And most kids obviously have moms and dads, and most kids don't understand the concept of orphan. So my kids were there, and then they were kind of processing what this is all about, and their little minds are working, and they get it. They get it that these kids, their parents might have abandoned them, or might have died, or for whatever reason they don't have parents, right? And then at the end of the trip, like my kids wanted to give their toys to them. It was very moving, and again, I get emotional when I share these kind of stories because, like, I saw the shift in my kids' hearts. I didn't say, "Hey Ryan, give these kids toys," but they somehow changed in their heart, and they wanted to give stuff to them. And I get so emotional about it. So, yeah, even that, like, is so powerful as a dad to see my kids change to acts of human service and acts of impact. We didn't have to take any pictures of Medellin. That alone was worth it.
Yeah, and that's I think a wonderful way to conclude our chat today. It's been really, really interesting talking to you, Ricky. We seem to have covered an awful lot of ground, perhaps even the whole world we've covered. And as you say, we could have talked for a lot longer. So yeah, thank you very much for coming on, and I wish you all the best in your future endeavors and many more happy travels.
You as well, Alex. I just want to commend you on the amazing work you're doing. I've had a chance to subscribe to your YouTube channel and watch a few interviews of other travelers you've interviewed, and it's been very enriching for me to listen to them. And I just want to wish your community and your listeners and your viewers all the best, and may all your travel dreams come true. And remember to give back and make a difference when you travel. If you want to connect with me, you can connect with me through Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube. Just look up Ricky Shetty, and I'm happy to make new friends. So thank you, Alex, and all the best to you as well, Alex.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.